I had started studying French when I was, I think, 11, 12, somewhere around there, like 7th grade age, and wanted to keep it going through my time at SMU. Everyone in the French department is really great, loves to encourage people to learn the language, has really fun ways of integrating interesting curriculums, all of that. So kept up my love of the language through that, as well as my engineering major through Lyle. And people made fun of me. They were like, Alexandra, what are you going to do with 2 majors in French and engineering? That's kind of weird. What are you going to do? Be a French engineer? Well, here I am. I just moved to Paris 2 years ago on what is March 19th. So I've been here for just over 2 years now. I originally kind of applied for a job in the cybersecurity space. It was the same sort of role that I'm doing now, which is it's a pre-sales engineer. So I go in and I consult during the sales process as a technical expert, then step out. For the past 2 years, I had been specializing in French public sector clients exclusively, which was an interesting choice to put a foreigner in, but it gave me tons of exposure to a really cool space to be in. And then recently I was moved to another team that handles the business for my company in Francophone Switzerland and Luxembourg. So I've still got some accounts in France, but I'm mostly doing that now.
First, I guess I'll start talking about my experience at SMU. So I really did not know I was going to take Italian. I just took the first 2 semesters freshman year, and then I ended up switching my major to art history. And then you're required to take another semester of a language. So I ended up taking 2 more semesters of Italian my senior year. So that was kind of a really big adjustment, but I had the best teachers and professors to kind of help me relearn what I had lost in those few years. And I kind of fell back in love with Italian and studying art. I really wanted an international experience. I think obviously all the best art, in my opinion, is over in Italy. So I wanted to explore that a little bit more. And I ended up moving to Milan to go to Bocconi University there. And it is such an amazing program. There were 25 students in my class from all over the world. So there was actually only me and one other student that was from the US. The rest were from everywhere else. And I was able to create such amazing connections and network really with people all over the world. And it was really amazing. Actually, one of my friends from Milan is coming this weekend to visit me in Florida. So that's really nice. And, you know, a lot like SMU, there were great companies and institutions that we were able to work with. So I was able to tour the Vatican Museum at 5 a.m. in the morning by the director himself, and was able to unlock the door to the Sistine Chapel and just tour some of the most amazing places. And we also had a very hands-on class. So all of our classes were discussion-based, and we did projects and presentations to actual institutions. So for example, we presented to some museums on how to actually improve their fundraising. And we also did one for Christie's in Milan, kind of to get more American bettors to join their specific auctions. So it was really, really an amazing experience. So it was an accelerated program, 15 months. So I ended up graduating December 2021 in that. And before that, I was interning at the Nasher, which is amazing. And then I went to work for a fine art gallery and art advisory, actually in Dallas. And that was amazing. I was able to work with some really amazing artists, David Yarrow. We had a lot of Damien Hirst pieces, but I wanted to be a little bit more client facing. And I was able to move to Tampa, Florida, which kind of seems random, but after moving to Milan kind of by myself, and knowing that I feel like I didn't know the language well enough to be able to move, but I I completely did it by myself, didn't know anyone. And I think that really like opened up the door for me to be able to do anything. And I think that was the number one thing I learned for sure, like taking my language and knowing, okay, I do know more than I think I do. And kind of not being afraid to learn more and ask for help and stuff like that. And that enabled me to move here to Florida, also not knowing anyone. And I really enjoy what I'm doing now. So um, right now I work with a lot of retail accounts. So some of my clients are Restoration Hardware, Neiman Marcus, McGee and Co, Magnolia, Our House. So really working with those customers and customizing pieces that they would want and designing those. So we ship a lot of the artwork to the store itself, to warehouses, and then we also ship directly to the end customer. And it's really, really interesting doing that. And I definitely say my language is used a lot more here than I would think. A lot of our production floor, they speak a lot of different languages. So we have French speakers, Portuguese speakers, some Italian, and a lot of Spanish speakers. So I've been able to kind of pick up and learn a lot more as well. And it's definitely helping me, I don't know, be more connected to the language. And I think it's a really great experience.
I was a typical student who took languages to get into university and high school. I didn't really have an interest. I thought I was really bad at languages. I thought there was, it was something that people had skills in, but it was not one of my skills. I took the bare minimum I needed and I went on. That was it. And I took it in Spanish too. So it wasn't even a language that I studied later on. Fast forward to university, I had some sort of interest in kind of learning the language. I wanted to try something new. I'd done Spanish. It wasn't like my cup of tea. Let's try something new, which is ironic because I live in Madrid now. And I tried Italian. And at the time I was studying engineering and I was doing biotech and I was doing all these technical kind of fields, but SMU tells you, let's try a language. And I fell in love with the language and I realized, okay, I think actually maybe it wasn't that I was bad at languages. It's that I had teachers that didn't know how to teach it, right? And I found that in the SMU Italian department. I got excited about it. My brain started working. I remember I'd done some spring break tours where we'd work with people in Guatemala and we'd done some work there that was kind of connected to EWB, but it wasn't Spanish. I'd been studying Italian, but still my brain had started to click in a little bit easier and it was easier to have conversations. It was easier to absorb some of the native languages even. And it was easier to kind of comprehend how our brain worked in the way we communicated, but also how we connected with people. So that was my first little taste that I was hooked. I ended up trying to fit in as much Italian as I could, which was 4 semesters with, at the time, a very technical facing degree. And it helped to also feed my love of cognitive science. And I realized it was a part of, how we communicate is how our brain works and how we connect it together. And I was working on international projects while in university. I knew that I wanted to continue to work on global projects moving forward or in some capacity. And so I unfortunately was not able to get a minor in Italian, but I loved my time with the department and really loved the language. And it was able to propel me into a space of how do I also get good at learning languages and get comfortable with going in spaces with people that speak something different than me. And so how does this connect to my career and where I've gotten from since then? I essentially graduated a little later than I expected. I graduated in the pandemic as well. As a lot of y'all know, the job market was doing its thing, as I know we're expecting it to do now. And so I had a 6-month sabbatical of sorts. And I said, you know what, I want to live abroad at some point. There's a program where I can teach English for 6 months. Let me try it and see what happens. If I hate it, I can go home. It's that easy. Like I can go there for a couple of months. And if it's really not my vibe, I always have the ability to get home. Thankfully, I was in a position I knew I was going to have a ticket, but it really became too much. And so I said, let's do it. I moved here. I knew no one. similar to kind of Sarah in this conversation. And I think you learn so much about yourself as you're trying to set up and you're trying to figure out your friends and you're trying to figure out, wait, oh my gosh, not only like do I not know anyone, but I don't know the language either. I hadn't studied Spanish since I was 14 or something. Thankfully, Italian's kind of similar. So when I first started speaking Spanish, I sounded a bit like an Italian. I sound a little bit better now. But I ended up teaching for another year. I love teaching. I really, really enjoy education. And so that is how I was propelled into a career in corporate learning, which is like the learning and development space. And so now I'm not necessarily in the classroom, but I'm getting to work with adult learners. And I'm based out of Madrid, but I'm working with an international team. And so it's kind of an interesting loop around, but even in my work in the classroom, I was still working with people who were speaking Spanish. And so once again, you're picking up on all those languages. And now my community of friends that I have here is from all across the EU and all across the globe. And so once again, we're picking up those languages and connecting. And if I think about what does my future hold, and I have dual nationality and I'm taking full advantage of it. And at the moment, I don't have any plans to return to the US, but a part of that means that I'm in the job market for the EU. And that means that you need multiple languages on your CV. It's like a basic. It's like you will not be able to be hired for another job. And they're actually actively looking for you to be able to expand those languages. And so not only am I trying to get better at my Spanish and maintain my Italian, I'm also trying to add other languages in there in the process because it does make me more marketable and it makes it easier for me to kind of move around. Because I have the passport and the permit does not necessarily mean I have the skills to work with all the colleagues that I'm looking for. And so that was a really big eye opener. And it's also got me excited about continuing to push forward into that.
So my name is Vilma Smith. I am an investigator for the Houston Police Department, not too far from Dallas. I'm part of the investigative unit here, which means it's kind of like you work on cases, you get a caseload and you work on those cases. I focus on working primarily with child sex crimes. And it's interesting how I got here. So my language I speak Spanish, I spoke Spanish at home, but my journey started at home and it became stronger at SMU when I studied abroad. My junior year at SMU, my advisor asked me why was I majoring in French. I was a broadcast journalism and French major. And I had all these French credits from middle school, high school, SMU, and she advised me to change it to foreign languages. So I added the Spanish in there and I'm so grateful because without that, I would not have been able to teach. You can be a French teacher here, but here in Texas, Spanish is everywhere. So after SMU, I did go into broadcasting. I was interning here with Channel 2, which is NBC. But I soon discovered that was not the path for me. Being in front of the TV was not for me. I was interviewing actually law enforcement. I had to cover reports for aggravated, assaults, robberies, kidnapping, and all that. And I always thought it must be really cool to be on the other side of the microphone. So I ended up working as a high school teacher. After that, I shifted from journalism to that because I had been working for Berlitz. And if you're a language person, I'm sure you know what Berlitz is. They're all over the world. It's a language center all over the world. And I had a connection with them in Dallas and it transitioned to Houston. And there was a school in Houston that was looking for a French and Spanish certified teacher and they could not find one. So they pulled me from Berlitz. And that's how my high school journey began. And I taught high school for over a decade, loved it. My last year, I took my students to France, southern part of France. So it was an amazing experience to be on the other side as a teacher. I took a break and now I'm doing this kind of like what Paola said. I volunteer with the Houston Police Department, but everywhere I go, my language is used. And in my particular role, what my day-to-day looks like, it's different. I can be in the office, on phone calls with witnesses, with not so much children because they get primarily interviewed by a forensic interviewer, but I do talk to, mom, dad, family members. In a lot of our cases, they are Spanish speaking. And my ability to speak Spanish to them just like breaks that barrier, especially when I'm interrogating a suspect. When a suspect is, eye to eye versus I'm translating for another detective, they feel more at ease. It's like life-changing for them, because it could be a matter of, putting this guy behind bars for 40 years or not. So that language barrier gets dropped, and I'm able to move the case forward in a much more stronger way. And a lot of the detectives here have to use Google Translate, but Google Translate only goes so far. So thankfully, I'm able to connect directly with my families, connect directly with those suspects. And and it's not just here in the workplace, but in my life, Spanish, and I took Italian at SMU. We've traveled abroad to Italy, to places like Colombia, and I'm able to speak directly to locals. And so it's part of my life as a child, and it has transitioned into my work.
So a little bit about me. I came into SMU not knowing what I wanted to study. I ended up switching my major about 5 times. I started in engineering, and I ended in international relations and history and some other stuff. I didn't get to do an Italian major. I got in by the hair of my chin, doing an Italian minor. So that's been great. So right now, right out of college, I worked at a think tank in Washington, D.C. for Walter Russell Mead and these other kind of political thought leaders who write op-eds and write books. So I was doing research for them. And then I moved into a more client-facing role, like Sarah has. And that's meant meeting with people all over the globe. So I focus on energy and climate change and sort of like oil and gas and this transition to renewables. So that means meeting with a lot of energy companies in Europe and Saudi Arabia and that kind of thing. So I actually do 2 things right now. That's one of the things. And then the other thing is this consulting thing that I work for a new practice called the Special Economic Zones practice. And I'm the second employee of it. It's just me and my boss within the larger sort of Albright-Stonebridge Group firm, which was founded by Madeleine Albright, Secretary of State. It was founded in 2001. A lot of Biden's cabinet is drawn from this firm. So, but this is a new sort of practice, the Special Economic Zones practice. And what we do is basically advise private companies and governments, our main 2 contractors. We advise them on how to build new cities, actually. So sometimes it's smaller than a city. Sometimes it's a new jurisdiction or a new sort of developing new regulations to change a city into a more business-friendly area. But the main point of what we do is trying to attract foreign direct investment to developing countries. So how can they best like attract these global companies and get them to come set up shop there? So some of our main clients are Saudi Arabia and Colombia, and working on a new project right now in Kenya, actually. So no, I don't speak Swahili, sadly. But so in college, I did the Italian minor. I did a year in Argentina when I was younger with my family in Buenos Aires. So I lived there, and then I went back there after high school for a gap year. And I taught English there. And I'm jealous of you, Gabrielle, because you taught for a while. So I loved teaching. If I were to do something else with my career, it'd be teaching. In Buenos Aires, that was amazing. Didn't study Spanish in college. I studied Italian, and then sort of by accident, I studied Arabic too. I went to Middlebury College for a summer and intended to study Russian, but ended up studying Arabic. Long story. So I came back for a semester of Arabic at SMU, but I'm not fluent. I'm not proficient actually. So I'm taking night classes right now in DC, trying to work better. So the way I found is language atrophies very quickly, which I'm sure you guys know. Like if you stop speaking it, it's gone, which is why. So in my current role, the language I use most is Spanish, but there's people in my office that also, like you, Gabrielle, were saying, in the DC sort of think tank international community, having languages is a necessity. Like if this is on your CV, you need, one or two other languages will make you stand out so much more. So everyone in this office speaks Italian, French, a lot of Arabic speakers. And our practice is a generalist. So we get to work with the Africa practice. We get to work with the Europe practice. We get to work with the Americas practice and the government affairs practice. So I like kind of get to like plop around in all these different groups, which is fun.
I did the Paris 6-week summer program with Professor Buckley and a couple of the other French professors. By the end of the summer, I was actively scheming of ways to not leave and try to like chain on a semester like right then. Really, I fell in love with not just a language, but a culture, a series of cultures, the ability to connect with other people in their native language, and seeing the way that my fluency like flourished during even those 6 weeks, I think was really like, I wanted that final push so badly. Like I just wanted to be thrown in and like see if I could tread water. And like I think it was the first time that I had really felt this pull or like this possibility that maybe it would be possible for me to establish a life outside of Dallas for myself, because I'd grown up in Dallas, I'd been there my entire life. And I think that being in sort of an unfamiliar situation really shows you kind of how easy it is to meet people, to adapt to things, to get yourself out of sticky situations, all of the above.
I started abroad in Cannes and, did a lot of the little town hopping in France. It was one of the most amazing times of my life. And that definitely made my languages stronger. And then once I got my degree, it solidified it. SMU abroad changed my life, like as a student, now as a mother, as a teacher later, absolutely just radicalized, opened my eyes. It just changed my life. It rocked my world because it opened my eyes to a new world, and being able to go and, hey, if you're backpacking in Europe and do like 7 countries in 7 days, kudos to you. But my abroad experience taught me to go into a library, talk to a local, go into a coffee shop and actually talk to a local.
So I did not study abroad while I was at SMU, but I did do a couple of spring breaks in Guatemala with EWB. So we were doing work, we were helping with humanitarian aid. And I love that. I love that work, and I love that time that I spent there. And if it wasn't teaching, I would love to be doing something like that. But I think in terms of my experience after graduation, it may be in part because I didn't study abroad. I knew I wanted some sort of experience that gave me a similar situation. And so I took a 6-month program for teaching English. And it was wonderful. It was a lot of people that you connected with that were kind of in a similar situation. So you got this family of sorts that were going through the same steps, and you were figuring out, how do I navigate this country? How do I get my housing set up? How do I figure out how to ask for the basics that I need? How do I navigate a grocery store?
Because, going back to the high school path, I would have been able to be a journalism teacher or French teacher, but not Spanish. And so I would strongly encourage that you get a minor. If you cannot get a minor, you will learn how to properly write it. And I feel a lot more confident in my reports when I'm translating and when I'm speaking to my suspects, my witnesses, medical staff, CPS personnel, and so forth. So I want to encourage those of us that grew up at home speaking Spanish. If you don't want to major or minor in Spanish, that's okay. But I would encourage you to major or minor in something else, whether it's Italian or French, because it will give you that that you know, kind of like what you guys are saying with your resume. And so a lot of these people that are hiring, they want to see something. It's like, what is different about you? You know,
I didn't know Italian the best. And I don't want anyone to think like if you don't know the language to a fluency level that you can't move to a new place and experience all of the culture and the language and really be a part of it. Obviously, it's a scary step. I moved right in the middle of COVID, and Milan was a hub for COVID. And so even in my master's program, it was like in and out of lockdowns. And I know someone mentioned like the grocery store. So everything was closed when I first moved there, except grocery stores. So every single day I would go to the grocery store, even though I didn't need anything, and just pick up one thing so I could go practice and talk to people and kind of feel a little bit more acclimated when nothing was really open. And then by the end of it, I moved to a little tiny island off of Sardinia for a month with my friend. And so in Milan, I guess it was easy to go around and not use the language because it's very international. But moving to the south of Italy for a month, you were really, really like, no one knows a single word of English. And me and my friend Paula, we were able to really like immerse ourselves. And it was such an amazing experience, much, much different than the one I had in Milan, where obviously my classes were in English. And here we had like little old ladies grab us by the arms, bring us into their houses and like give us espresso. And it was great. And I think the one thing I would say is for sure, like, don't be afraid to do something, even if you feel like you don't have the experience, because you definitely can do it.
I would just recommend that anyone that can fit it into their schedule do so. And if you can't, there's options to do it after graduation. So I would say the other side of it as well is there's a handful of degrees that we have that are super tight packed, and you're pushing and you're pushing and you're pushing. Well, if you can pause for 6 months afterwards, there's programs you can do to get that taste of it and enjoy it. And so know there's options.
It really opens up a lot of doors. You know, just taking that like next step is really important. Also professionally, I think it looks great just to even go abroad, right? Like you're saying that you did this by yourself and you were able to be brave and do this. And I think that speaks volumes on a resume or CV as well.
So I think you've seen in all of our time, is it added to our careers afterwards? And so I want to pause and say that if you think taking, a moment in between a corporate career and university would be a bad decision, I would say, I think it could only add to your resume. And that's something that's really positive to point to, because I wouldn't be able to have some of the opportunities that I do now if I didn't have some of the abroad experience before stepping into them. This idea of confidence that comes with traveling to somewhere new and getting acclimated with it. And I would say confidently that my time abroad and my ability to acclimate in a new place gave me no worries that I would be able to put myself into that space and be able to navigate a new city, a new town, multiple new cities and multiple new towns, and really come out of that with a really wonderful experience and being able to grow my circle of cultures that I've been able to touch, so to speak. And I think that just being in a new space for a month and being comfortable with it and knowing that you're going to be jumping into these new spaces, that's invaluable. I mean, if I were to be in a place where my job had asked me that I needed to go there and work or go to somewhere else and work, and knowing that I could say yes. And the only question is, what's my ticket and when am I leaving? Because I knew I could get myself up and running. Not only is it incredibly marketable, but it's incredibly empowering as well.